Well, welcome everybody. Let's get this meeting to order. I'll just start off with introductions. I'm Roger Rail. I'm Chair of CARD and Chair of Scio Residents for Safe Water.
Vince Crusoe, Treasurer of CARD, on the board of the Sayer Club, and coordinating member for the Elm Creek Watershed Group.
I'm Michelle Dietrich, Vice Chair of the Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners.
I'm Shauna Milkey, Ann Arbor resident and secretary for CARD.
Rita Locke Crusoe. I'm a professor at the University of Michigan, and I'm a charter member of CARD and Allen's Creek Watershed Group.
Kathy Knoll, Scio Township Trustee.
I'm Matt Knott. I'm the environmental coordinator for Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, would you like to introduce?
Diana Wright, interested spectator, Ann Arbor resident.
Bob Bailey, a Scio resident.
Jeff Hayner, I live in Ann Arbor, interested in water.
My name is Mackenzie King. I'm new. I'm a University of Michigan student. I'm also interested, concerned citizen as well.
Dan Bicknell with Global Environmental Alliance.
Kristen Schwegel for the Environmental Health Director with Washtenaw County Public Health.
Okay. So Shanna, you want to talk about the minutes?
Okay, yes. We're almost ready to vote. I believe that Kathy had a couple suggestions that she wanted to make, and then...
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, that would be great if you could pull them up, and then... So this,
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
These are minor and quick. Under 3B that starts, Gelman has appealed to the Michigan Supreme Court. I think we should delete that last sentence. It appears as if Gelman is trying to outspend the interveners. I don't think we should be raising our opinion on what Gelman is doing or not doing.
Okay, sure.
Just delete it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And then there was one other, it's a very small thing. Number 6, second paragraph. Let me find it. It says, second to last sentence, when discovery resumes, comma. Well, there's no discovery that is going on right now, so it's when discovery starts.
Okay.
Because there's no discovery that's been going on, so.
So there's been no discovery
No,
period
no.
in this?
No, because right now we're in this is common knowledge for everybody, just the potential settlement negotiations. And it's not discovery. Discovery is the beginning of a lawsuit when you exchange interrogatories, you ask questions of the other side, and they have so many days to respond. We're not at that point yet.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for catching that. All right, so with those two changes, I think the board is ready. So the board votes on the minutes, just so that everybody knows. So I move that we approve the minutes from the September meeting. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah, and
We have a
Kristen,
quorum, 3 out of 5.
we do, and then Kristen is voting in place of Jenny, if you would like, because
okay.
she normally votes, because the
Yes,
board is
I
the
wasn't
4
sure if she
officers
was
and Jenny, yeah, and she's a voting member.
Yes.
Yeah,
Aye.
okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Right.
Okay, so
Even
minutes
better.
approved.
Okay. I
Thank
didn't know if
you.
you were having me sit, like, kind of sitting in front, but I didn't know if I got to vote too.
Yes, you do get to vote.
All right,
Thank
cool.
you. All right, thanks for approving the minutes.
Thanks for doing
Thanks for
that.
taking it.
And so they'll be distributed to all.
Yes, what I need to do is send out links to the group of all the minutes that we've approved, and I haven't done that yet. We have about 4
Well, what we
minutes
do,
worth.
we have
Good fun.
we have a Google account for CARD, and we have Google Drive, 15 gigabytes of stuff. So one of the folders is minutes. It's under Google. It'll be under CARD Docs, and we'll have other things under there as well.
And Roger, just so you know, and I talked to Shana this week, sometimes you can't open that Google account.
I just told them that
Oh,
earlier today.
okay.
For people who do not have Gmail
Yeah, I wasn't done
addresses,
yet.
yeah, they're having trouble
Yeah.
opening the
You
documents.
mean viewing it?
Opening it, yes.
Yeah,
you don't have
opening
what?
it. You have to have a
Gmail
Gmail
address?
account.
Sounds like
you
the
don't have
share
a Gmail.
settings need to be
Yeah.
changed.
Is that legal?
Okay, I'll
What do you mean,
check
is it
that.
legal?
To not have a Gmail account. Everybody in the world has got one.
Does anybody can show me that right now?
Trust us.
Well, I don't
Trust
think we
us,
should take
Roger.
meeting time
No, but
for that.
it might be a setting on their end.
No.
Okay.
No, it's-
Well,
No.
All right, well, let me double check what I did,
Yeah.
and then,
I mean, because what I usually do is I go to the file up here and I do share.
We know how to do that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It
I have it
doesn't-
I
on
think
my,
we should
doesn't
move
work.
on
Don't
to
have
item
it on
number
my
3.
Did you
iPad.
try to, Dan?
And get
Yeah.
share.
Well,
It just
many
keeps-
times,
it-
the
it's
things
better
I
to have
receive
things separate.
in this Google
So
type
everyone has
link
one
format.
And
I can't.
so I can't access it on the
Is
iPad.
that for the whole drive?
For that document.
Or just for that drive? Right, so you need to make sure the whole drive. Anyway,
Yeah.
getting in weeds.
No, it's,
Would it be
we want to
helpful
do
to put it on the
it by
calendar site?
folder.
I mean, if you guys.
Maybe some things with a folder.
In the
Okay.
folder,
Right.
but you should be able to do it by file too. And sometimes what happens is if somebody doesn't have an up-to-date browser or doesn't
That's
have,
not the issue.
something. Yeah.
Sometimes just attaching the document the old school way works.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to item 3.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. So item 3, updates. Kathy, I think you
Yeah.
want to start this off.
Couple things. You recall last time we talked about Gelman had approached Scio Township about potential construction on a lot, the Porter Street shed, I'll call it. In this shed, they have the pipeline connection, the pump that pumps water from the Evergreen area and other areas in Ann Arbor to treatment on the Gelman site. It pumps the contaminated water for treatment on the Gelman site. And they approached the township. Bryce scheduled it as a regular pre-application meeting. 2 representatives came in, the guy who would build the shed, the person who would attach the new pump, and neither one of them knew why it was being done. Our township planner was there. There were like 7 people there. I was there, Bryce was there. And the gist of it was they couldn't give us the information that they needed to give us at the meeting. So another meeting will be scheduled.
So you basically asked them why they're doing this? and
Yes.
They didn't know,
Correct.
and so they couldn't go forward.
Correct.
Scio Township would not let them go
Correct.
Because they didn't have a good
That is
explanation.
correct.
Okay.
Yep. So we're going to follow our normal pre-application process. There's a whole checklist of things that have to be gone through. And most likely now, given all of this and the uncertainty that occurred at this meeting, our planner is going to be very involved, and it's going to have to go in front of the Planning Commission. There'll be a public forum, an opportunity for public questions, and then it will have to come to the Scio Township Board for a vote. Same thing, public forum. Then, about 5 days ago, our attorney was contacted by the attorney for Gelman, and this is still playing out. That's all I can say. The next meeting hasn't occurred yet.
Was this a contact relating to this
Yes.
decision?
Yes.
Okay. You were told that.
Correct. Yeah. So it's still evolving. And I'll update you guys next month.
But didn't you have some indication from somebody there that, this has to be done like right away?
Well, initially when they contacted the township, when Gelman contacted the township, they said they needed the meeting as soon as possible.
But this were the people doing the work?
Yes.
Okay, so they
Well, they're the
wanted to get their
representatives.
thing done and get paid immediately. and that kind of
Yes.
thing.
Probably.
Yeah, so,
So now 3.5 weeks have passed, so I don't know what's going to happen here.
so just to give a picture of this is the Porter site. And this is the property, this piece right here is the parcel they bought,
Who bought?
Gelman,
Gelman
To-
owns it.
to do the drilling from
Don't want us
to the north and to the south, horizontal drilling, half mile each way, so they could bring untreated purge water back from the core, or back from Evergreen to the core for treatment.
What level do you think? How many part per billion?
Well, whatever you're purging, so, several hundred. And while they were doing the boring, the people doing the boring said, hey, well, as long as you're drilling a 17-inch borehole, and you're going to put in this 6-inch, or not even a 6-inch transmission line, you might as well, actually it was more smaller, now it was like 4-inch. You might as well put in some horizontal wells too. So there's 2 horizontal wells on either end of this, the north side. These are screens that would allow them to purge water from the pathway, from from this borehole. And that purging probably pulled out some sand that the pipeline was put in, and that part of it may have caused the transmission pipeline to sag because the transmission pipe failed. And so did it fail on the southern end here too. So they had to reline the purge well over several months one summer to continue the transmission of untreated dioxane from Evergreen back to the core. They didn't have a contingency plan in place before that. They just played it by ear. So I don't know what's going on now that they have to change a pump or something.
No, they want to add a second pump,
Add a second pump.
but they wouldn't
Pump
state
fix.
why they want to add a second pump.
Okay. Now, just so you know, this next parcel here, they got rights to use part of that as well. I think this is where that woman lives, and I think she owns this parcel, so they got rights to use this parcel. As you can see, even on their own diagrams, it shows that the pipeline extended into that. And just for more background, you might want to see what it looked like during the boring operation when they were drilling this.
This is HDD drilling.
I'm sorry?
This is horizontal directional.
Horizontal drilling, yes. Because I went out and took pictures. Okay, water pipeline. This is about the first one here.
Actually, because it's residential, it gives us more.
So this is actually from a video I took. So these are screenshots from the video. I think I got a better one here. It's also there. So this is Porter. And you can see there's already water gathering there because it's kind of a low point. And that's actually back at Evergreen where they had to extend the pipeline there. There's no curb and gutter there, so they basically went down. Do you know anything about that, Matt, about this portion that was back at the Evergreen side?
Well, I'm not sure what the question is.
With regard to what?
Well, would the city get involved on installing this?
Surface pipe?
Bypass or?
Yeah, is this part of what was put in with the phase 2 where they had to have manholes every so often?
Oh, I don't know. That was along, I think Dexter.
Does it seem hot in here?
That was,
It
yeah,
was.
that's on, actually, that picture was on Valley Drive. Here's what it looked like right after they finished it. There's the pipe coming out of the ground, and there's standing water there in that woman's lawn.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what that was all about. And it disrupted the neighborhood for quite a while. It also flooded. So there was times where they had to close the road because of dangerous conditions in the winter, ice on the road and stuff.
Are they able to buy the rights for this from willing landowners, or do they have to get eminent domain declared, or how's that working?
They made an agreement with
The
the
landowner?
widow next door and said, this is needed to do the cleanup.
Right. It just seems like if as a community we're going to pursue really cleaning this up, there's going to be more of this, not less.
Right.
And there may be unwilling landowners.
Well, Gelman owns this parcel.
Yeah, but
I
they
mean,
got the rights to
addressing
the
whole
next
plan,
parcel.
Right.
It's in a residential neighborhood.
There was an issue.
Do you have dates for the planning meeting yet?
No.
Okay.
Do you want to know when I get them?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, I've just seen this playing out with the frac gas pipelines all over the state.
We had issues in Ann Arbor with them drilling wells on private land that the city had to try and rein them in, so to speak.
Yeah, they put in an extraction well on Warden on someone's property without, any real discussion with us. So since then, they've been pretty good about, we've asked them to use the city right-of-way where possible, because then we have a license agreement, and we have control, and we get copies of all the sampling, and for the last, 8 years, I forget when Warden went in, but it's been pretty good, and I would assume to the extent there's if there were additional need for wells or pumping, we would look to city right-of-way.
Anyway, this whole transmission pipeline was put in at the cost of $2 million, basically to bypass meeting local regulations to put in pipeline along rights of way. And somehow they were able to do that without local government approval. So this is now becoming local government approval, whether they're going to raise the building and put in an extra pump or
That's what
something.
they
We got to
wanna
find
do.
out what this is all about.
Totally reconstruct the building. And the building was never permitted through our site plan
Right.
review process in the first place. So
Right.
that's another reason it needs to be this time.
And it's important because there was one point where they were storing chemicals there that shouldn't have been stored there. It was too close to residences. And that, put a stop to that. Anyway, that was that.
One more piece of information that I wanted to share that Bryce and I just learned about this yesterday. Apparently, this is unrelated to this site, but Gelman is placing a fence around their property. The perimeter of all of their property by what they're calling Gelman Woods. That's what the term someone used. They're going to fence all the way around it. We don't know why. We just found out about it yesterday.
Well, a lot of people walk through there
That
with
is
their dogs.
correct.
And of course, I have video of the discharge point from their property.
If you're walking in Saginaw Forest, it's easy just to walk around and by where they have the discharge point. It's just a little footpath over a creek, and there's the discharge right there. So I don't know why they're doing that, but anyway, that's probably the area that I might be concerned about.
They could be doing that to keep people from being exposed to the vapors.
Or taking samples, one or the other.
Yeah, or they just don't want people poking around.
People poking around.
I don't know what they're going to do about the deer, though. 'Cause the deer sleep back there. Guess the fence won't be high enough to keep them out, right? Or keep them in.
How is it that they're doing this building and trenching along, laying pipeline without even a building?
This is a different location, though. This is west of Wagner Road, and the Porter Street is east of Wagner Road. Slightly different location.
Does that make a difference on whether or not a building permit is needed?
Well, there's no building permit needed for the fence. They own the property.
Oh, no, the fence is, I'm sorry.
I think she's back to the
I
Porter
was
Street
about
okay. I didn't
2
know
minutes
that,
behind
'cause
where
we were on
we
the
were
fence.
talking
Oh, I
about,
know.
I know.
talking
Okay.
about Roger was mentioning, they're putting in piping, the da-da-da-da-da, and they don't seem to need, I think Roger's words were local government approval.
Well, that was before, way back. That was different. When
But
it
they would
originally
to
went
do
in.
the same work now,
They
would?
want to modify it. They want to put in a surface pump and change
Oh, I
the
understood
structure.
all
They
Yes.
probably,
Yes, they do need it.
but they probably didn't bother getting a building permit for the surface building that was connected to
Some time
the
ago.
underground pipeline.
Some time ago.
Yeah, and now that they're having to
Okay.
make a
I'm
change to
sorry.
a township is saying, oh, wait a minute, you never get a building permit before, but now you do need one. And that's good, that the township is aware of this. I mean, before, I'm not even sure the township, got any notice that this was going on. But now it's good being involved.
I think it's now that it's sitting on a foundation, maybe they figured it out, it's like a shed,
Well, it is a shed, but it's permanent. I mean,
I-
when you've got pipes coming up through it,
Yeah.
it's permanent enough that you're not going to be moving this.
Right, depending on size, typically you need a building permit for permanent structures.
Right. So anything more on that?
No.
Okay, then we had this municipal and agency coordination meeting. I was kind of hoping Bryce was going to be here. Let's see who's supposed to give this update.
You could give it.
I could give it. I can chime in.
I can
You
give
start.
part of it.
Yeah.
This is just a general, it's called stakeholder community agency group. Multiple elected officials, multiple representatives from the DEQ. Roger attended this last time. Or several city or Washtenaw County commissioners in attendance. City of Ann Arbor people were there. Matt wasn't there this time, but he's been to some of them. And we discussed, well, there was an agenda, multiple different issues. The structure on Porter Road was discussed very briefly. Updates on this Rule 201. There is going to be, let me find this here, a public meeting on this new rule package. Tentatively, we were told it was October 11th in Ann Arbor. Is that still true? Do you know? It was tentative from the DEQ. The DEQ was going to present it.
I think it's still tentative, but I'm not 100% sure.
I haven't heard anything
Yeah, I haven't
further
heard
on
much
it.
about it.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
Next week, so I kind of think tentative for more off.
You think it's off now?
I don't know.
Well, they were assuring us at that meeting that there was enough lead time. They had to waive a 15-day notice in order to get these 7.2 parts per billion approved as a special permanent rule or
Right, those
something.
are two slightly different things. So the emergency rule for the 7.2 expires in, I'm going to say late October. I don't have the date off the top of my head. Pardon?
27th of October.
Thank you. And so whether or not JCAR waives the 15 days, there's still enough time to have the 7.2 go through. So whether they waive it, it goes through earlier. If they don't waive it, it'll still go into effect before that expiration date. Right?
That's what's anticipated.
That's what's anticipated, yes. And then the full Part 201 rule package with the 300 plus chemicals will start the process after the dioxane rule is finalized. There's already a meeting about Part 201 and some other, is it vapor intrusion? I think it's like
Probably.
It's like some sort of training or
Yeah, the
educational.
vapor intrusion training in Ann Arbor next week.
Right, and so they were thinking that that would be a great time because there's a lot of remediators there and a lot of stakeholders who deal with vapor intrusion to have an education session on the patrol rules in the evening after that training. But they were trying to see if they could find a room, and that was the last we heard. Does that sound right to the people who were there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, my notes are on my desk, but I flew up here and.
Excuse me, is it anticipated that when they begin discussing vapor intrusion, that it's going to be based on the buildings that are in existence, or on the ideal building that I've heard all about from DEQ on a town hall meeting they had at Washtenaw Community College several months ago? And it was crazy. But they were talking about their
Michigan basement issue.
precisely, and it doesn't have to be a Michigan basement.
Yeah.
Where the plume, being in Ann Arbor, that's where I'm trying to keep my focus. Although understanding Scio Township is certainly
Let's
part of
hold that thought till item 6 on the agenda. 'Cause
sure.
There's a number of things related to that.
Excuse
One
me.
of the key things that came up during this,
I have a question.
yeah,
Can you define vapor intrusion for me?
again, let's hold that till number 6
Okay.
here. Is that it's not, it's just more than vapor, because there's another pathway we're concerned about. One of the key things that stood out to me was that Sue Leeming has been shifted to another position. And it was Kathy, what's her name?
All I wrote was Kathy. Oh, yeah, Sharon.
Just taken over. And so I offered to give her a briefing sometime because I'm not sure how much up to date she is on this.
I'm sorry, who is the replacement for Sue Leeming?
I didn't bring her card.
Kathy Shirey.
Okay, do you know how to spell that?
SCHIREY.
It's almost Shirley,
And
right?
Kathy with a K?
K.
Okay, thanks.
It's just like Shirley without the H, is that right?
Okay. Without the L? Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, so, and the title is the same as Sue's
Same as
old
Sue.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah, she took her position.
She was Sue's assistant before that,
Right.
assistant, deputy or assistant.
Okay, thank you.
There's one other thing I see here, Roger, that should be mentioned. The DEQ, Mitch commented on how they're going to expand some of their well testing. They're expanding it on Rose Drive and Christine Drive in Scio Township. And one other area, which I didn't get.
Well, it's around the peripheral. So I think you're talking about Scio Meadows and places like that.
Yeah, residential.
Residential. And, you know, there's some discussion about the $750,000. You know, that do we need to tap that right away in order to use it? And you know, this is the special, what do you call it? Appropriation to make up for not having money from the company anymore. You know, when they settled for $500,000 out of $5 million. That they still need to do monitoring around the peripheral, but it wasn't clear whether they're even tapping into that money yet. Is that right, Kevin?
We haven't touched it yet.
Haven't touched it
Yeah,
yet. Is that money going to go away if they don't use it?
No, I don't believe so. Yeah, I think we have touched it a little bit. We hired a mediator kind of a thing. We're trying to do something, so we probably spent a few $1,000s. You know, that's after 10. You know, it wasn't very much.
Right.
What I remember from the meeting is that it was stated the money would not go away unless some huge crisis occurred that required
something that
its
is more
use.
priority. Right?
Yeah,
But it's
well,
not
it's
like-
like government. I can't guarantee it, but we don't anticipate it going anywhere.
Right, yeah, and there's no structural reason.
There's no,
that we would
no
lose
strings to it.
access
They can pull it back,
Yeah.
there's no
Access.
clawback.
Right.
Once it's assigned,
Yeah.
it's ours to move around and deal with.
There's also a lot of discussion about improving communications one point, there seemed to be support for having a better website. And I think I chimed in and said it's more that we need more than just a website. We need to have, and the website can't be under the DEQ control. It's got to be under the local community control, preferably through CARD, so that we have input into it. Because right now, if you go to SRSW, you see all these other websites, and if you click on them, there's always something in them that's not really up to date. Like you go to the DEQ website, and you see things from, years ago. There's, really the 2004 is the latest fact sheet? I don't think so. And to a layperson, to try to find anything in here is really difficult. I mean, even for me, I have to, so I go to selected documents. Okay, selected documents. Okay, well, here's some good selected documents, except these aren't the same level of detail as they were years ago when we had.
Okay, but I think you made your point.
Yeah, that there's a whole bunch of.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one thing, and then the city, the county, the township card itself, even some of the SRSW stuff is out. So what I propose that we do, and I want to be able to take this back to this larger group, is that we look at all the elements of all of our websites and say which are up to date. We need to have this in a central, unified website that's kept up, that's more up to date, has all the proper information, and that's understandable by lay people, there was discussion there about during this town hall meeting, people didn't know about the Gelman. How were they supposed to know? Well, read the paper. Well, we don't have it. Okay, well, look up online. You look up online, you find a website, but it doesn't really help you understand. So we need something that a first timer can get an overview of in a quick, and then if somebody wants to dive deep, they can dive deep from that point. So that's what I propose we do is we.
Who's going to do that?
Well, there's a subgroup as part of this.
Volunteers?
No, it's part of this intergovernmental thing. So I think that's where some of the money can go is to have some staff time to pull things together, and then we, as a group, and CARD has to be a part of that. So we probably need a subgroup within CARD too that wants to work on this to identify what are the elements that we want. How do we pull it together to make it the most effective communication tool so that it can be there for the life of the cleanup?
Right, so I think there's this stakeholder group, and there was some discussion at the meeting last week to have a subgroup that represented each of the communities, because the $750,000 is DEQ's money. They can't give it to anyone else. It's not a grant program, it's not, so, potentially that money will be available for them to do a website, is my understanding.
Or to sign a contract, because Sue talked about signing a contract.
We can contract with it, or another option is DTMB as a website with a lot of environmental information, and doing something, connected to that, something similar along those lines.
And I mean, when we've done Google Analytics for our county sites, people don't go to the county site and type things in. They drop into it with a search engine. So making sure that, things have search-friendly terms, and that, we have those easily understood fact sheets that are short. And if people want to dive deeper, they absolutely can, but, keep it pretty brief. I think a lot of the calls and people that come into our office, they're not going to Google anything. They want to talk to a real person. Right. And so you're always going to have that population. Mm-hmm. But then even if we can hand them something, if there's a fact sheet, that gives them a little bit of background, that's helpful too.
Printable fact sheets are nice. I like them. They can hand them to their neighbors.
But to be clear, what I took away from that meeting is that any website funded by DEQ money would be, it would not be cards or this state holders groups, it would belong to the state government, be maintained, and content would be controlled from there. Is that
I don't
accurate?
know that has to be the case. I
Okay,
mean,
that was
I've been the
right
one
away,
talking to
but-
U of M about a case.
Yeah, we
This-
didn't really get into that because we didn't have your details on the U of M
I know.
thing.
I mean, it's just
So-
another model that's out there.
Yeah.
So U of M is this right time on the agenda for this?
It's website related.
Okay. So Rebecca Harden is a faculty member at the U. Michigan has a couple $1 million to do Michigan sustainability cases. We did one on the Gelman site, but with a student focus. And the premise was Rita was involved and another faculty member.
Alan Burton.
So and so they've got a platform on how to teach people about certain issues, and the thought is there a way to take some of the material that they've already created, work with CARD to say, what's Roger got that, there's kind of an FAQ, there's various levels of depth, and how do they build that, but then use their teaching analytics to kind of say, what did you know before you came to the site? What do you know after? And then use it as an iterative way to build the site. So in that case, the regents of the University of Michigan would own the site.
And which, I mean, I think this is a really intriguing idea, but I was talking about funding. And are you thinking that the funding
The
from the
state could
fund
fund
this?
this.
Contract?
And so Rebecca's had a conversation with
Right.
Mitch. I was out with funeral stuff last week, so I wasn't in those conversations, but I still think this is a good idea of something that could live on. Because the university knows how to teach people. And I just think they're really interested in, can they take what's typically an internal focus of how to teach students and have it more
I'd like
outward.
to see the university involved more. So that's one of the things. The other thing is to have this in place as kind of a aggregation of information from different sources. Like the DQ really needs to provide the sampling data because they're the only one that gets it directly.
Yeah.
So this entity wouldn't hold the sampling data, it would just rely on the DQ for that. Similarly, each of the local governmental units has information that needs to feed in. So there'd be components of it that may reside on the county side or the township, and we pull that in as needed. But that all this aggregation is done by CARD. And the funding would be minimal, really. I mean, we're not talking about,
This would be hosted on U of M
It'd be
site.
time.
where it's hosted is not
No,
the
I think
important
they're
thing.
mixing
The
apples
important
and
thing
oranges.
about having it is that if the hosting site ever needs to change, you can pick it up and move it somewhere else. Because you're going to have to do that when you're talking about many, many decades long project. It may not be hosted where it is. Now, I did talk to the library, and they're willing to host information. They can't make any
No political.
nothing, they can't make any judgment about it, but they can host things. So that's a natural thing because the library is kind of a repository, and we've already got all the Ann Arbor News, Gelman archives hosted there. So this is a work in progress, and I want to bring this up at another meeting. Probably not next month because I'm not here next month, but maybe the one after that. We'll focus more on this as we get a little bit more information. So any of you that want to weigh in on this, let me know.
I would say that the vision that I think that I can see working is one in which whatever site we create links out to other sites, because we
Right.
can't really do a whole site, and that the U of M case studies would be one such site
Exactly.
and not be the main site that would therefore try to
Right.
be the integrative site. It's a good site for, gee, what is this all about? And getting some fundamentals down on the history and
Yep.
and that. But it's not going to substitute for what you're talking about.
But last meeting, didn't we talk about, because the county's sort of the sanctioning body of this group here, that Conan sat in this very chair and said, county's always got money. and maybe we could leverage some county IT for
Yeah, he had said he would look into that.
that's more secure of a situation for a permanent repository. For
Yeah, as far as money, in fact.
And it wouldn't really be a lot of money, like you said.
Right, and the funding is not that big an issue, because all the local units are willing to contribute to the
IT resources are.
It's going to take a fair bit of an effort to get something going. Collect all the information, and then you can sort it around. But there's a lot of information out there.
Right.
Partly due to Roger, largely due to Roger. But it's just a lot of stuff is available.
Yeah.
And sorting it out and
Indexing it is a big
indexing
issue.
it and making it accessible. It's going to take a fair bit of work. I mean, the posting is the least of the issue. It's actually organizing it and bringing it all together. And
I think you have like a public face and you have more of like a private face to that sort of operation.
Good.
I'll just throw not this hat, but perhaps another hat out there. Because in my other life, I spent 15 years as a creative director of 2 interrelated large internet companies. So I'd be happy to get in on this aspect of maybe it's someplace I could help.
Yeah, this will be an
Site
ongoing.
design and organization. And
This has to be an ongoing collaborative process with representatives from all the different factions and citizen involvement and people that have to know how, because.
But someone has to take charge.
somebody has to have money to hire somebody to bring this all together, because I don't think volunteers can pull us all and put it on the website. There's just way
We can
too
talk
much.
about that.
Well, the coding aspect not, but the organizing aspect possibly.
Yeah, there's a lot of-
Create the wireframes and everything.
Okay.
Right. So is there anything more in that meeting?
That was it. I think we're meeting again next quarter. I think we said it January-ish. Does that
Yeah,
sound right?
it's
And
pretty
then
much a
the subgroup
quarterly
was going to try and
function,
get some conversation going about communication and website, but that has not been scheduled yet.
So maybe by then,
Yeah.
CARD can have some feedback ready for that.
Okay, municipal and agency coordination, please.
All right.
Yes.
That's what it's been called.
Okay, thank you.
So we're on bullet 3, under number 3.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep,
Yeah, so Dan, I know you want to just get out of here by now, but I want to talk about this a little bit.
Sure. Well, as most all of you know, the townships in Sierra Club filed a petition with US EPA to conduct a preliminary assessment to make the Gelman site into a US EPA Superfund site in November of 2016. US EPA accepted the petitioner's request, and they will complete the preliminary assessment by November of this year. So that's quickly coming around.
Anytime in November?
Well, they have a specific date when we filed it, but likely before that date, they'll make their announcement. The other thing that is of interest, I think, to everybody is there was a July 25th call last year with the city, county, township representatives with US EPA Region 5. And it was more or less, okay, if this does become a Gelman Superfund site, what might US EPA do at it? And of course, they could only generically talk about it because they didn't have all the facts at that time. But they said that their policy is active restoration of the aquifer to protect it to drinking water criteria. And this differs from the current approach that's being done. They would extend as a first priority municipal drinking water supplies to Scio Township and Arbor Charter Township at Gelman's expense, again protecting the drinking water supplies of the local people who may be impacted by this. They would halt the expansion of the dioxane plume and treat the source and outer margins of the dioxane using active remediation, something like groundwater extraction and treatment, which is currently being done, but being done very limitedly. They would, as part of this active remediation, prevent the potential for Barton Pond to become contaminated, so we wouldn't still have to be asking DEQ for a contingency plan on that. I think the observation is that with all of these actions, particularly extending the municipal water line, the restoration of the aquifer, these sorts of actions will probably limit any future reductions in local property values, because what you have now, as you remember in the town hall meeting, were real estate agents saying that, well, trying to sell a piece of property, The potential buyer doesn't want to buy it because its view is that the plume may come over and take away the drinking water ability of the residential well. So it seems like these actions would be constructive and likely reduce, or if not eliminate, local property value devaluations. The other important part, I think, in the progress is that US EPA made a determination that the consent judgment is not protective of public health and the environment. When we all petitioned as the Townships and Sierra Club, the US EPA, they said at this July 25th meeting that they couldn't take this forward and accept the preliminary assessment unless they made a determination that the consent judgment it wasn't dealing with these problems properly. And they made that determination, and I would also observe that so did the city and county when they were filing their briefs to do the intervention, also made that conclusion that the consent judgment is not protective. If the EPA concludes that it'll continue the process towards making the Gelman site into a Superfund site, in other words, after their preliminary assessment is done, they say, yes, we're going to continue to go forward, it appears that that is a very constructive path that we've been on for the last year. However, if they do not accept that, or in the future they are receiving public comments that indicate and they decide that they won't make this into a Superfund site, this is really the only chance they're going to give us. You can't every year ask to do preliminary assessment for the Gelman site to become a US EPA Superfund site. So this is like our one bite at the apple. So I think that over the last year, there's been a lot of discussion on intervention and negotiations and things like that. My observation is that it's taken you to the Supreme Court. And right now, for an undetermined amount of time, you're going to be waiting for the Supreme Court to decide if they're going to hear the case or not. And if they decide to hear the case and you win, then you're going to be with the case going to district court, not going to be settled out. And if Gelman isn't happy with that, then you're going to go to the appellate court and Supreme Court again. So it seems like you might be in for a lot of litigation, which is the Gelman modus operandi right from day one, right?
Well, not
I mean,
just them.
they fought us for community for 8 years before they decided to do anything. So, but if this is not accepted as a Superfund site through the various steps that have to be done, that's kind of where you will end up not being able to resurrect it again. So I think it's worth talking about with our colleagues that, okay, fine, remember for this past year, we decided specifically to go on 2 paths. I mean, that was the decision that was made back in November by the city and local governments and county. So, okay, I think it would be wise to sit there and say, okay, where have we gotten in this year period? How much money have we expended? How much money do we anticipate expending to get to what ends? But for US EPA, they're going to make a determination probably in the early part of November on whether they agree to go forward or not. If they do agree to go forward, then the next steps are to do a site inspection. The site inspection step generically assumes that there's no information, but as we all know with Gelman, there's tons and tons of information that they can use and will use as they did in their preliminary assessment phase. After the site inspection, what they'll do is they'll score it using what they call a hazardous ranking score. So collect the information in the site investigation and follow the process to score the site. If the site scores more than 28.5 out of 100, then they can go forward and make it into a US EPA Superfund site after accepting public comments to do that and getting state concurrence.
Excuse me. When they talk about doing a site inspection?
Inspection, yeah.
Right, site inspection?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So
you would
for
call
something like
investigation,
the plume,
sorry. Site investigation, I'm sorry.
Fine. Whatever.
Yeah.
But for something like this, where the site keeps getting bigger and there's no definitive boundary that we know of, I mean, we test wells, but nobody knows, I haven't heard yet anybody say definitively that when you test a well, you're at the edge of the plume. You may be, a half mile or more from the edge. So what's the site? I'd be curious what EPA thinks a site inspection is. Now, if they're going to bring out half a dozen cars and walk around the Gelman fence, they're going to miss the point.
No, what they would do is they would look at the existing information, the existing monitoring wells, the existing data, and if they thought there needed to be supplemental information collected through them, US EPA, installing monitoring wells and collecting information, then that's what they would do to get their full, if you will, picture. So their site inspection investigation, I apologize, site investigation is what you would consider an extent and magnitude study. In other words, where is the beginning and the end of the plume? What are the concentrations? They need that to score the site, generally. But if they do score this site, and you plug in the existing information that they have, now it is going to score more than 28.5. On groundwater, I run the model, it's going to score around 50. So when they get to this step of scoring it, more likely than not, it's going to make that hurdle. So anyway, that's kind of the steps that will follow if they agree in the preliminary assessment to take this forward.
Dan, it was my understanding that even if they agree to take it forward, that it could take 1 to 5 years in the next phase.
Yeah. The site investigation, investigation, I got it right today. The site investigation is going to take between 1 and 4 years generically. But with this site, it's going to take a lot less. It'll take maybe about a year and a half, in my estimation, to do, because you've got all this information that's there. What they'll do is they'll look at all the data. They'll say, right, I don't feel comfortable about this extent. I don't feel comfortable about this. I don't feel comfortable about that. They'll draft together a work plan, and they'll go out and fill those data gaps that they see through actual collection of information. Then they'll come back and say, right, I think we've got a clear picture. Let's score this now. Okay. In other words, when they score it, they'll say, what are the receptors? In other words, what's the population that's exposed? Okay. And what's the concentration of dioxane that is there today and into the future? Those are the basic questions they have to answer to score the site. Who's exposed now and in the future, and what's the concentration that's going to be impacting them now and in the future? And with that, then they plug it into their model, their hazardous ranking score model, and out pops the number. I did that using the existing information. The number that pops out is 50, which is the highest you can get on that. Because there's so many receptors in Scio Township. Okay, Scio Township itself, if it wasn't for the city, because I didn't figure in Barton Pond being impacted when I did the calculation, I just figured in Scio Township. Okay, if it's just Scio Township, north of 94 and in that area, boom, it's maximums that you will be inputting into this model.
Based on exposures through wells.
Yeah, residential wells, right.
Is that decision tree and the scoring, is that the stuff that I'm seeing over your shoulder? Is that the stuff that's on the EPA website?
It's not over my shoulder.
No, I mean right there in front of you.
No, this is the flow chart.
For how the decision is made?
Yeah, this is a flow chart on how to make a site into a US EPA Superfund site. It's
how
not,
they do or how
it's
we
not,
should?
No.
It's how they do.
It's their process.
It's their process.
Oh, and that's available on the EPA site
Yeah.
or something?
They have a lot up there. They have something called a exposure assessment,
I
risk
think I saw
assessment
it. I just wanted to
toolkit.
see if it was the same
Now it's
thing.
kind of
Right.
last couple
Well, you
of
can,
years,
I mean, just go in, if you just Google HRS scoring package.
All right, that's what's
Yeah.
wrong. That's really what
HRS.
Yeah, it hazardous ranking scoring package. Boom.
All right.
Yeah.
In their investigation, do they go out and actually look at wells?
Yes. Yes, they look at wells, they install wells, they sample residential wells, they sample creeks, rivers, anything and everything they think that needs to be analyzed
When I
to
say
determine
wells, I mean
the
like the
dioxane concentration.
yeah, the ones they have out there right now in people's yards and things. Will they be doing those?
They may. they need to decide what they think needs to be additionally gathered from what has already been collected today. So as you know, some people believe that the extent of the contamination, the boundaries of the dioxane plume haven't been looked at. Well, if they feel that's the case, then they'll put wells on the outside. If they feel that in the old west side it hasn't been delineated in the shallow aquifer and there's people there that could have vapor intrusion or workers who could be come in contact in the trench with the shallow groundwater, then they'll do that work. So whatever work they think is necessary. Out at the old Gelman site, you've got that used now for commercial purposes. Okay, what's the exposure that's happening there to those people? Okay, you've got a lot of residual soil contamination that's left. Are there vapors coming up into those buildings? So they'll ask all those various questions. But again, they have to be able to say, here are the populations that are exposed. Here's how they're being exposed through air, water, whatever. And here's the concentration that is in the air or the water that they're being exposed to. Those are the basic three things they need to then do their calculation in the model.
Thank you.
So there's been a lot of questions in Ann Arbor about, well, this is a waste of time because Trump is going to, torpedo EPA. There was actually a Washington Post article that actually interviewed Pruitt, and he said when there's a responsible party, basically, that he was not going to undermine EPA Superfund efforts. In fact, he says he's going to try and enhance them because he's got a lot of communities in his home state that are very dependent on this. At the Sierra Club 50th year reunion at the Washtenaw County, Washtenaw Community College, I actually talked to W. Stabenow, Senator W. Stabenow, and I asked her that question point blank, is EPA still viable for Superfund? And she said she agreed completely with the assessment that the Washington Post had, that Pruitt is not necessarily going to torpedo EPA Superfund, especially if there's a responsible party. And that's where we come down to who's going to pay for this? If EPA gets this work and starts doing the work, who do you think is going to pay for it?
They're going to take on who's ever in the chain of title for the Gelman property, which would be Gelman Sciences, then it would be Paul Life Sciences, and then it would be Danaher. Okay, they're going to hit all of them because the law that they're operating under, CERCLA, the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, has joint and several liabilities.
So it's a federal issue, not a state.
This is a federal issue, and what would happen is that federal administrative order, whether it's negotiated with Gelman, Delman, Danaher, Paul, or it's told by the federal government that thou shalt do it, a unilateral order, it's all going to be paid for by them. And if they don't step up and do the work, then the company, and if they don't step up and do the work, then the Superfund, which is the big pot of money, that's going to call the Superfund pot of money, will do the work, and then they'll sue Danaher for cost recovery. And having been a U.S. EPA enforcement officer, I can tell you that the responsible parties do not want to have government contractors doing the work that they then have to reimburse costs for. They'd rather hire somebody that they can control the costs and do the work. So in almost every case, the responsible party, Danaher, will negotiate as best it can to limit the amount of work it needs to do and then do the work. That's generally the case histories on those things.
I follow up on a point that I think that we need to make it clear to residents that EPA is not a dead duck.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that has been promulgated by many people that I've talked to, and almost as a means to undermine an EPA Superfund effort.
Well,
to say, why bother doing this? It's a waste of time. We're just going to go back to ground zero. We're going to go back to the beginning. Why should we bother? And this notion is that EPA is dead. Why bother with EPA?
And I think that's
get this information out.
Right. I think that's what we kind of need to do is go back to our constituents and say, hey, remember back in November we were going down two paths. Some of us decided to go down this path. Others decided to go on that path. But it was, I think, pretty much mutually agreed by everyone, even the lobbyists, that at the end they were going to go on the path that got us there the fastest and the best. So I think it wouldn't hurt after a year of really not raising the Superfund issue, I think, in front of the local governments to kind of remind our colleagues that, look, we do have a option here, and it is progressing.
But it's
And it does have a lot of
limited
positive
time
things.
option. That's the thing. We have to
One-time
get
option.
on this
One
quickly
time.
because we maybe have a year left.
Well, they'll do the site investigation and inspection, whatever you want to call it. And after that time, they'll put it together. If it scores over HRS, then they go out for public comment in the Federal Register. That's the time that people will then weigh in. They aren't going to be able to tell the government, sorry, we don't agree with you moving forward in the preliminary assessment phase to do site inspections. They won't be able to stop them. But where they will be able to stop the process is when they receive public comments, which is after the scoring package is presented in the Federal Register.
As part of the Sierra Club board, we actually sat down with Michael Burkhoff, Region 5, and he actually started asking questions, tried to gather information. He said anything, he was particularly interested in the soil concentrations that are not being addressed, and he wanted to know anything about that. If we knew anybody who was involved at the site, who worked there, who had stories about how things were done at the site that may give them evidence as to concentration amounts and types of concentrations of compounds, what might be at the site.
And practices.
And we've been providing him that sort of follow-up information.
I'm just putting that out. If anybody knows anyone who worked at Gelman.
You worked there.
I worked at Gelman, yes.
Yep.
During
And you
the
worked
period
at
of time that
Yep.
they were
Yep.
watering the lawn.
Right.
Now, I wasn't involved in that part of it because that was production of fluid, and I was in hardware engineering.
Mhm.
But
They're still good.
Roger said something to me a little while ago. I'm reminding you, this was a really, really long time ago. There may be people in this room that weren't even alive. And thank you, you're really making me feel good. But I have begun starting to ask, do you know where it happened to? And I'll drop a name.
Oh, good.
Until I have a list of names that I can bring in here, names and phone numbers
Right.
of people that I've talked to that, I remember that, yeah, sure, and then if somebody's like the EPA has a question, and people get a little nervous and jerky about that, but
Well, there was a very good summary that was put together by the Attorney General when they brought the case back in, I want to say 88, 89,
Mhm.
against Gelman, that has a lot of good history that can be shared with people. Because they did look at all of those issues, the spray irrigation and the holding ponds and things like that, the illegal discharges that were going on. But US EPA, with Pruitt, more of his concern is the climate change aspects. That's where he is not, if you will, being very proactive. He wants to overturn all of the Obama climate change rules and regulations. But as Vince said, he fully supports the Superfund initiatives, RCRA initiatives, and also, I believe, clean water. So I think the EPA is a good partner to get in with, and they have very capable Department of Justice staff that the community does not have to pay for to get the job done.
I'll just point out this thing right here. This is Tucson. These are monitoring wells in Tucson. This is a map that was just produced, released by the EPA, done by USGS, I guess, showing the wells that are going up and wells that are going down. The thing that struck me about this,
1,4-dioxane.
1,4-dioxane, right?
The same chemical.
Same chemical. The thing that struck me is that all of these graphs, remember this is an EPA, US EPA Superfund site. They all have a high level of 15 parts per billion.
Right. They're very
And it's a
low.
Superfund site.
Yeah.
15 parts per billion.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Sometimes that doesn't show up in some of our graphs. We're talking about 100,000 in 2012,
2 million.
10,000
2 million
just a year or two ago, but in the soils, we don't even know because they haven't sampled the soils in
Could be
10,
2 million
15
probably.
years. Well,
Yes.
a million anyway, but we don't, so the issue of the EPA is that this surely should be a Superfund site. And it should be a Superfund site, not just the fact to protect our water, but this should be a study site for the whole country.
Well, this is what I told Burkhoff. I said this could, and they did this with White Lake, although some people contest whether White Lake was a good outcome or bad outcome. But they used White Lake as an example of how to clean up really dangerous sites. And this could be a site where 1,4-dioxane was pretty much used by itself. There's other contaminants, but not very many others, and they're not in high concentration. EPA is very concerned about this compound. So one of the 10 they chose that they could actually test to add to the toxic substances list that was part of the Lautenberg Act that passed at the end of the Obama administration. They had all these compounds they could have picked. This was one of them.
Either one.
Thousands and thousands of compounds.
And one of the top 10, yeah.
So it's in the top 10 easily. So this could be a site where EPA could come in and look at effectiveness of 1,4-dioxane cleanup because they're finding it all over the country. They clean everything else up and this is what's left. And many sites. It's really hard to get rid of.
Right.
And they're really, and it's the toxic, the chart, the
Toxicity content?
yeah, the toxicity level has dropped on this. So now, and the state has decided, yeah, we can't be at 85, we have to be at 7.2, could be lower. So
Well,
over
we
the
should
years,
hear,
it's become more of a concern. So
yeah.
this could be a site for that.
Yeah, so we should hear within the next month, month and a half, how they've come out on this. It is probably likely that they're going to say yes.
Well, I know that I know you gotta go.
Yeah.
So, since this is a one-shot deal,
Yeah.
more or less, right? More.
We have one bite at the apple,
Yeah.
right?
So, is there anything that we should be doing to influence this decision positively or not doing to have a negative influence on it? Like, we had people on city council say, we don't want Superfund because it's going to flip everybody out. The real estate guys opponent. I don't want somebody working behind the scenes with their political connections to torpedo the Superfund effort. So
Yeah.
is there anything that we can
Well-
do as CARD to get the word out? These are what we should be doing, this is what we shouldn't be doing.
Well, again, we had those discussions about a year ago.
Right.
And everybody agreed, some reluctantly, that we would be going down a couple paths.
Okay.
And everybody, but reluctantly, agreed that their path was the best, but we would look at what it was after a year or so. So I think you're right. We need to just remind people that, look, instead of just focusing on this litigation aspect where it has taken you to the Michigan Supreme Court, and you're sitting there for an undetermined amount of time, there's this other option that we explored and we're going forward on, and here's where it is, and the federal government's going to make a decision in a month and a half on it. So
And then it's own momentum, so it's nothing.
Yeah.
It's going. It's happening.
Well, the townships and the Sierra Club continue to help US EPA with any information that they need.
Yeah, and I just want to.
And we continue to do that.
And there's been regular dialogue with the EPA and Scio Township. But I also want to say, there's also regular dialogue going on between the EPA and the DEQ and
Right.
Gelman.
Right.
And the EPA is saying that they want to work with the DEQ. So they're...
But you got to understand that the whole situation is that if this becomes a US EPA Superfund site, okay, they will be working with the DEQ. But the DEQ will not be in the role that it's in today. It'll
I
be in a
understand.
supporting role. The federal government will be in the lead role and on this Superfund site.
Yeah,
So,
I understand.
and you're right. Everybody is sharing information. I know they talk with the city people. US EPA, I think, had a chance to talk with you guys.
Nobody's ever talked to me.
Everybody's talked to you.
I
They've
don't
talked
know.
to other colleagues. I know.
Nobody's talked to the county at the EPA.
Nobody.
I mean, other than saying hi at the public meeting that they came to council.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like on a
Yeah.
side,
Right.
what's going on the site, what
Well,
are your
that's what I meant
concerns?
at the public meetings where they were there, right?
They just did the presentation.
Right, and they did the environmental commission, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the
Mhm.
council, I think. Commission.
No, just the commission.
It was EC,
Yeah.
it was the Environmental Commission meeting.
But we continue to, through the petitioners, talk with EPA, provide them information that they need, and receive their feedback, and they communicate with DEQ on different questions that pop up. But at the end, this is the important part, if it is a US EPA Superfund site, the federal government will be the lead agency. It will not be the state government.
Well, Scio completely supports
Yeah.
that. I mean, these two approaches aren't mutually exclusive, and
I would think that would
Well,
make several
they kind of
people
No, they're
are,
not.
because
They're
one
not.
of them is going to lead
Federal law,
to a federal
state law.
administrative order, and one of them is going to lead potentially
Maybe.
to a modification
we don't know.
of a state consent judgment.
Maybe.
So there's not a lot of overlap. It's either going to be a federal order or it's going to be modification of a state order.
No. At this time, they're still not mutually exclusive. We'll see where they go.
Well, that's not correct, Kathy, sorry.
I don't know. We can
I
talk about
do.
it later.
I do.
Okay, we'll
It's-
talk about this
it's
later.
not correct. It's either one,
Well,
it's either
let's
one or
see.
the other.
Does the
We
federal
will,
order
we will
take?
not have both in the end.
That's right.
We can
Right,
all
but
agree on
right
Does the
that.
federal
now,
order take
where
precedent
we're
over that?
going,
Like they have
they're
the
not
authority, right?
mutually exclusive right now. They
They
may
are.
be later.
They
Okay,
are.
let's talk later. Let's talk later.
So
So anyway.
Danaher is the responsible party as of today.
If they were to be issued an order, the order would be issued to everybody in that chain of title.
Yeah, 'cause there was
To
talk about
Gelman,
Danaher back
to
in-
Paul Life Sciences, and to Danaher.
The EPA path.
On the EPA path, right.
EPA
Yeah.
trumps all that.
On the
They
state
try
path,
to put it on Gelman and make bankruptcy,
Spin
then
them off.
they'll revert back to Paul or down.
Okay, just to be clear, because that's another point people are asking,
Right.
you know, they're gonna spin them off and we're gonna be stuck with it anyway, so, you know.
Yeah, but is it better to find that out? I mean, first of all, the EPA is not going to let them get away with doing that, which is what could happen under the current way it's been going with the DEQ 30 years from now. You know, Gelman could declare bankruptcy, and then what? You think the DEQ has the wherewithal
Right.
to make Danaher pay for this? I wonder. You know,
Thousands of
they
lawyers.
can't even get.
I don't even
Get a
think they
hearing
have
in
the
court
guts
now.
to do that.
Huh?
My opinion of DEQ is quite low.
Yeah.
I think the remediation, I think they're part of Michigan Council of Tourism, and the idea of having a Superfund site is antiphona to their charter.
They have a lot of them.
They have a lot of Superfund sites.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of Superfund sites that people don't know about,
Yeah.
and that's part of the things that might be useful to point out to people, that Superfund is not a stigma. What is a stigma is uncertainty. When you have new revelations that should have been made public all along, and there doesn't seem to be anybody in control of keeping this from attacking new water supplies.
yeah, there was a number of studies that were done, and they looked at, okay, there's this site, it became a Superfund site. Did that hurt the property values? What the studies found, and we're talking MIT and University of Oregon, people like that, is that if there was positive proactive action on a remediation, then generally the property values didn't drop. However, if there wasn't action and the plume continued to expand and there was no plan to stop it, then yes, there was negative impacts to property values. So that's the good part about US EPA, is they are proactive and they're going to stop the plume and extend the water line into Scio
Which will be
Township.
good.
And so that will cut away the potential losses in property values.
Yeah, if it's spread.
Anyway.
And they can, plus they can get involved fast enough to keep that from happening. We still have a window of time. The other two things that the EPA would do, well, they would establish a buffer zone around their idea of what the plume is, so that there's even more more certainty that it's not going to contaminate anybody's well in that area. The other thing is that right now, under the consent judgment, and Dan pointed this out to me, and I guess I just never realized it, is that the prohibition zone can be expanded by either party. Unilaterally. So anything east of Wagner Road is fair game for the company to say, well, we're just gonna let that go, you need to expand the prohibition zone.
So right now.
They'll pay for the water hookups, but then those people will be annexed to the city, they'll have to pay for their own sewer hookups, they have to.
That's a very contentious issue, whether they'll
Yeah.
annex more properties.
Right, but right now, the way that
Yep. It's
is
set up.
written
Yep,
is
yep,
that
yep.
the company can unilaterally expand the prohibition zone. And that's a very big weakness
It's a
of the current
taking,
region.
of people's resources. 'Cause
Again.
a lot of these homeowners can't afford a
Right.
sewer hookup, and they have to pay for that. And they have to drop their well, they have to drop their septic, and it's a hardship, and it's not being compensated.
Yep.
You
So
still have
that's-
quite a bit of that agenda.
So that's
Sorry,
kind of the
Dan.
update.
Yep.
Thank you, Dan. That's very helpful
I think-
to have that
I think the
update.
tiger in the tall grass is the city of Ann Arbor. I genuinely do. Because the development in Scio Township is relatively large homes on fairly large lots. You're talking about a fair amount of value. But as far as a head count on the people or the families or whatever potentially affected, it's really quite small. I mean, with all respect to Scio Township, compared to going to Ann Arbor and discovering that everywhere east of Stadium Boulevard and north of Liberty, maybe north of Liberty, maybe south of Miller, all the way to Argo Park.
But you also have to understand that a plume moving underneath the city does not provide good benefits to the homeowners. And it's a stigma that is driven. So
Exactly my point.
Each homeowner in Ann Arbor is now supposed to be, when they sell their house, saying that they're in
Or the facility.
a facility, and they're supposed to have a declaration, and in that declaration is supposed to indicate what is the extent and magnitude
That's if you're on top of the plume.
of the plume, if you're in the prohibition zone or you're on top of the plume.
Be anywhere in the
Either.
prohibition zone, even if you're not, the
Yeah.
plume hasn't reached you yet.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure of that.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I am.
Yeah,
So the problem, you're right, from a drinking water aspect affects Scio more, but on a pure economic standpoint, with property values and stigmas, there's a lot of risk in Ann Arbor to continue to let this plume migrate through the city. So I think I know the city has everyone's interest at stake, whether it's just their property values, or it's Ann Arbor Charter Township wells, or it's Scio Township wells. I know everybody is concerned about that, and everybody's looking out for each other.
And the city understands that if these wells in Scio Township and Ann Arbor Township get hit, the next on the list is Barton Pond. So long before it gets to Barton Pond, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty if these get hit.
The city's a good neighbor.
That's why I commented that Ann Arbor is the tiger in the tall grass.
Yeah.
We're
Should we
going
move
to
on to
worry
the
about Scio, and then
next
Ann
item?
Arbor is going to
Yeah,
come
if we're
down
going to
with
get through the
tall
rest
grass.
of it, we got to
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
turn it up, yeah.
Thanks, Dan.
See you, Dan.
Hi, Dan.
The next issue, any new maps at 7.2. You know anything about this, Kevin? Probably not.
Nope.
We know that they have done maps at 7.2, at least a few lines on a couple maps in the past. And even though I guess in court, did they say they didn't?
Well, maybe we should ask at the quarterly meeting, because maybe there
Yeah.
will be more information then.
But as far as we know, there's not going to be any 7.2 lines on the map that's due out in a couple weeks.
Why not? I mean, who decides that?
The company with
But-
the DEQ.
So why can CARD request that the DEQ
It should have been,
Request
because the emergency order said 7.2.
I know, but it's not happening, so this is what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Is this something that
It's
CART
one
can
of the
take as an action?
concerns, one of the things.
And say that this should be public,
Right.
this is part of the obligation of communicating to the public.
Right.
If 7.2 is the current standard, we should know, where that is by
Exactly.
current models and
At least a
information.
reasonable facsimile.
So, can we do something about that today?
I will, let's move that to under list of concerns, because it is one of the list of concerns under, for CART, is to have maps at 7.2. In fact,
I'm almost
to
saying,
have it where it can be detected.
why can't we even act as a group and request that DEQ
Why don't you make a note?
ask that the company provide this? I'm ready to
By
put that
itself
forward
or
as a
part of-
motion.
I'll
Part of
second the
our,
motion.
part of our other concerns.
Is it an other concern? Okay, I'll wait.
Well, what if we put it on the agenda for the quarterly meeting? Because
I won't be
there
there.
will be
I want to.
management from DEQ there. All right. Well, although, so if we make a motion today about making the request at the quarterly meeting?
Yes,
Why don't we do that?
yes, that's fine.
All right.
You see, that's, all I'm trying to do is, if we
Well,
have,
I would expand that to say, a motion to the DEQ to require the company to provide plume maps
that
instead of
designate,
just 85 parts per billion.
that designate the
Designate
7.2.
7.2, in fact, go
Yes.
beyond that to
Keep it
1
simple.
part per billion. We'll even take the 1 part per billion using their older analysis method, because that's what we have to have some heads up before it gets to
Okay,
township.
well, what's the motion? It's got very,
Okay, yeah, so the motion, I think, is to ask DEQ.
To require-
at the quarterly meeting,
Require the company to
Request.
provide plume maps
that includes,
with 7.2 part per
Delineation.
billion boundaries and 1 part per billion boundaries.
great.
Because both of those,
Should we
we
vote?
know they can do it, they've done it before.
Should we vote?
All right.
To be seconded.
Yeah. All right, sorry, I didn't write that down exactly.
Okay.
Could you please say it again? You might not remember
CARD
what you just said.
asks the DQ to require the company
Slower.
CARD SDEQ to require company
to provide plume maps.
It required Gelman.
It
Maps,
required
yeah.
Gelman, yeah. Gelman.
Gelman to provide plume maps at 7.2.
Showing the delineation.
Showing
Of the plume.
delineation of the plume
At 1 part per billion?
At 7.2 part per billion and 1 part per billion.
and that we would
At
make
the-
this
at the
request
quarterly.
at the quarterly meeting.
At the quarterly meeting. That'd be great.
At quarterly meeting.
Yeah.
Well,
that's what
I
we
think-
said.
That we would make the request.
Well,
It does.
Because they're there.
they already do,
Yeah.
they already
Yeah.
do this
That's
quarterly.
okay.
We don't want just a one-shot thing. We want this to be done
Routine
as part of their quarterly
update.
update.
No, that we would make the request at the next quarterly meeting. Which
Oh,
is
that we
coming up
will-
in
okay,
November.
okay, I
That's
see
the
what
point,
you're
to
saying.
make sure it's an ongoing,
Yeah, okay.
Ongoing.
ongoing process.
That the quarterly updates involve this.
Yeah.
Right, the quarterly updates have maps in them, and we just want the maps to be expanded to provide 7.2 part per billion and 1 part per billion.
Okay. All right, well, I believe that Rita made the motion and Vince
I'll
did
second.
second it. All right.
All those
so-
present in favor?
Well, the problem is, all right, for voting, the people who are eligible to vote are Matt, Kathy, Rita, me. Well, and the county has 1 vote, either Kristen or Michelle, and Vince and Roger. So of those people who are eligible to vote. Yeah, okay, so in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay.
I don't think I can vote.
Okay.
vote, but I did anyway.
Okay.
Any opposed?
Let's do it.
I'm worried about directing Gelman to do anything while we're in the court case.
Do you think, is that
No,
the same for
I feel
Kathy?
fine.
Yeah.
Because the non-disclosure agreement only pertains to what happens in settlement negotiations. So we're okay for other things.
Roger.
I'm
All
fine
right,
with it.
any opposed of the voting members? Okay. Opposed, all right. So we will, I can draw up this request to, and either Roger, or you're not going to be here, but somebody from the board will present it at the quarterly meeting.
Yeah, I can do that.
When is our quarterly meeting? I just want to make sure.
November 7th, the election day, so unless we need to change it, it's 10 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday the 7th.
Thank you.
Kevin, do you guys have the day off that day?
I'm sorry, what was that time?
DEQ have election day off?
10 o'clock.
It's 10 to noon.
Oh, wonderful, I'll have to go.
We'll gladly reschedule. So
It's a quarterly meeting with
You
DEQ,
usually
so.
do, the state usually gets the,
Okay.
as
That's
a
why I'm
state
wondering,
holiday.
because
then we
that's.
will need to
the whole-
reschedule.
Okay.
That is so civilized.
Is that,
Indeed, but we do not, so.
is, will you coordinate with DEQ, or do you want me to? Or?
I can reach out.
Yeah, okay.
If you postpone it a week, I think I can.
That would be great. I guess it would be
It's
helpful
not
to have
Veterans
you
Day,
there.
is it?
The 14th?
No, I guess 11 is Veterans Day, so.
It is Veterans Day.
But that's the Tuesday, right?
Yeah, so you're thinking about Tuesday the 14th?
Yeah.
All right. So
Okay,
should
let
we
me,
see it?
I'll check.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Kevin, you're gonna help with that, right?
Tuesday the 7th or Tuesday the 14th?
Well,
Right now it's
Tuesday
scheduled
the
for
7th is the current scheduled date, but DEQ has the day off because it's election day.
Oh,
So if it's not a regular work day for them,
Yeah, there's no point in having
probably
them.
won't be here. And it would be tough to have a quarterly meeting with them.
Yes.
Right.
As much
Maybe
as
get
they
some work
enjoy.
done.
They want
We are all
to take their
here
day
in
off
the
to
dark
come
of
here
night.
instead of voting.
All right. Can I move that we skip the last bullet and move to item number 4? Yeah. All right. I don't think we need to vote on that. All right. Mackenzie King is here. She's a student at U of M, and she is planning to do a documentary on the dioxane issue. So please go ahead.
Yeah. I'm Mackenzie. I'm a University of Michigan student. I'm in my second year. I'm currently pursuing a dual degree, so I'm in the Stamp School of Art and Design. I'm doing photography, as well as like some graphic design and things like that. And I'm also pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Programming the Environment. I'm not sure like which lineation of that yet. But I've known about this issue for a little bit because it's affected some of my family members and their property. But I really feel like it was something that some of my teachers didn't even know about. A lot of U of M students haven't heard of. And really all around probably an undereducated issue and topic with Ann Arbor residents. And I didn't really know like kind of what my place was and how I could do anything about it, if I could do anything about it. But I've been doing a lot of more documentary style photography and video. And I think kind of what you guys were talking about earlier about kind of streamlining this information. So that's presentable in a way that people can access it and understand it. And I think that's a reason why I pursue photography and visual information is that people can understand it who don't know what's going on and they can relate to it. And it's something I'm passionate about because I know about the environment and I want other people to be passionate about it and care. And so I guess as far as the project's going, I'm not sure quite yet where to start or where to go from that, but I really urge all of you, I know you're very busy people, to reach out to me if there's anything you think that is worth documenting. Let me know anytime on whatever part I can contribute to kind of help in this process. I know there's been some articles and stories and things done on this issue, but I feel like it's pretty isolated and limited. And I think, especially just coming to this one meeting, you can see that it's a very process-oriented issue. And I think that needs to be kind of like illuminated. So I will be here after the meeting if you guys have any questions or anything. And like I'll leave my email with you guys so you guys can get in touch. And I'll keep planning to come to these meetings as well so I can stay as involved
That's
as
really
I
good.
can.
Yeah. And I do want to talk to you. We've been talking about this at our Ann Arbor Video Interest Group. There's a couple of guys that want to do a documentary about this. So
There's an archive of all the meetings too, all the town hall meetings, every place you've been, I've seen with the little camera, right? So
I have
there's a lot of archival footage.
I have
related to
10 dozens of hours of video from historical video.
So there's also Kevin Leeser, who does documentaries. He's actually started on some 1,4-dioxane material. So
Yeah, he was one of the guys.
Making some footage.
So where do your parents live?
So my parents live in West Bloomfield, Michigan, but my dad grew up here in Ann Arbor his whole life. My grandparents live here, my cousins live here, a lot of my family's from here. They live almost over near Plymouth area, but still within like the Ann Arbor area that's been affected.
But not within the city limits, or Scio Township or Ann Arbor Township?
I don't know their exact address. Is that bad? I should know my grandparents' address. But
It's okay.
Road or Plymouth, Michigan?
Here's the map
Plymouth
right
Road,
there.
over by Plymouth Road.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here's 90.
You should
here's
also
23
follow
over
up
here.
with Rebecca
Okay.
Yes.
Hardin, Hardin, because they're likely to be starting some work, and I think they'd be, this could tie in nicely with some of the things that they're planning. So
Who's this?
if you need the faculty member at the U
Oh, right.
that is doing the Michigan cases, because they might even have a little funding.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, 100 years from now, people are gonna have to know what happened here, how it got to be the situation, and what we did about it. And we gotta document a lot of this while we still can, while there's some key people still around.
Well, getting this out on the internet
Mhm.
could be a really effective way
Yeah,
to
I've been
do
in
some outreach
Yeah.
and get some pressure on.
I've been doing a lot of outreach within some of the publications at U of M that I'm a part of or worked for in the past. And I know there's a lot of like Ann Arbor publications as well that I've been in contact with. So I'm excited to kind of see where that goes and start working with you guys on that level.
That's great.
I will remind you that Ken Burns has an 18-hour series on the Vietnam War that only lasted a shorter period of time than this.
Never knew all that.
But also a Pioneer grad.
And a Pioneer grad.
I think we should also skip item number 5 because we always
Not a
get
problem, you know.
bogged down on that one
Right.
and maybe move to number 6.
Yeah, we probably don't have a whole lot of time to go over this either, but you had some concerns about earlier, the question you had about vapor intrusion versus.
Well, yes. I went to, as I mentioned, I went to a town hall meeting out at WCC several months ago. And it was a discussion around DEQ's activity to establish guidelines for the depth of soil needed
Right.
between a building foundation and a known contamination. They had a geologist there that was, frankly, just a little spooky. Because he had a map of Michigan that had hundreds of different soil types that they had analyzed for vapor intrusion. And it became just this overwhelming amount of data that got the problem solution nowhere. And they were talking about, the geologist was talking about some of the assumptions he'd made in his study. And one of them was that you could turn over the interior air in a 2,000 square foot home, and I forget the amount of time. It was no more than a day, but maybe less. Well, it didn't take me long to figure that with an 8-foot ceiling, that's, it's 16,000 cubic feet of air. And I looked at him and I said, are you telling me that a modern constructed home leaks 16,000 cubic feet of air in 24 hours? I said, that's bigger than a swimming pool.
Well, he's probably talking about remediation.
No, he was talking about his data.
Like radon abatement systems, right?
No, he was talking about like,
Just regular leakage.
help me out, because I'm having a senior moment. That building, that Superfund site, I think it's Superfund, up on the White River, over towards the west side of the state, where they had an old chemical dump.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
It's nothing.
The Hoofer Chemical site, and there was somebody in the audience that wanted to build condos over the site, and DEQ wanted to get property back on the tax rolls. Well, all of that aside,
You, I sent it to you. What?
their
Legit.
analysis of
He
intrusion,
sent me the
their
email.
whole database,
Vapor
their whole
intrusion.
study was
Yeah,
based
read it.
upon new construction designed to prevent vapor intrusion, possibly with plastic bags or, visqueen under the floor, special care, vapor traps in the basement storm sewer, on and on and on.
Did you get it?
Okay?
So I remember
My
when
concern is,
you brought up Michigan basements in one of the prior meetings.
my concern is, and the one I voiced at the town hall, and frankly, the fellow that was there from DEQ dropped his eyes when I mentioned it. So I may have touched a sore spot, was that if they're doing all of their analysis on vapor intrusion based upon how far below the ground level the presumed plume is, whether it's measured or not, they're presuming, and the basement, the home that they were using as their model for this study at Hooker Chemical and elsewhere, okay, they're completely missing the ball, especially with the plume on the old west side of Ann Arbor. There are basements there that leak like a sieve when it rains. There are storm sewers that percolate up like a coffee pot.
Some of the basements are dirt basements.
And
But they don't
that's
have
when
to
I
be.
threw out the Michigan basement.
Yeah.
I know they're there. I've had
Oh,
people
yeah.
live in own homes over there.
Ryan Stanton has one. He's
Well-
he's a newspaper guy.
The point is,
DEQ.
DEQ.
He doesn't have dirt.
He's got dirt.
Does he have dirt,
He
really?
has dirt.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
my
a lot of
point
times
is, for
Michigan basements
DEQ,
are a portion of the.
we need to
footprint.
know, we as CARD, we as Ann Arbor,
Yeah.
need to absolutely demand to
Realistic.
understand their model, because they'll toss it out and say, well, we've done studies on vapor intrusion into homes. Hands up. What home?
Yep.
Who, what, where, why, and when?
Important, yeah.
No,
Yeah,
it's
that's a good point.
crucial.
Hey, Matt, and Kathy, because you guys both have assessment systems, we know whether it's a Michigan basement or not in a house from the assessment data.
But you don't even know but
No, I'm saying,
but
we
you
could,
don't know
Because
the
all
color.
of the databases.
It's
We
on
could-
the MLS, so it must be
uh,
on the cities.
we could provide some data on that to know what the extent of that is.
Well, I
I
would,
mean, we can pull that out of the assessor's database. I can find out what David's got. And
Yeah, I mean, what
But I
kind of
would- I
basement
would
it is, whether
suggest-
it's a crawl space, whether it's Michigan basement, all that is coded and such, yeah.
but I would suggest that,
MLS has it.
pardon me,
for
just
sure.
one minute.
You had a point, one minute.
I just
go ahead.
wanted a definition of vapor intrusion.
A vapor intrusion is where,
Exactly.
normally
That's
vapor
the
intrusion
gradient.
is where for more volatile substances, where the
Trichloroethylene.
substance really wants to leave the water and enter the air, and people breathe it in directly as a chemical. The issue with this is that dioxane doesn't like to leave water, which is why it's hard to clean it up, why it's hard to take it out of the water. The problem is, if there's water standing in a sump pump or in a basement, or in the Michigan basement in the soil, the water may evaporate and the dioxane may go with it in the water vapor. So you're actually breathing in the water vapor that has dioxane. It's not the chemical itself as a vapor. So that's a pathway that hasn't been well established in a study.
So that could come from a sump pump in somebody's basement?
Or just the moisture,
Anyway.
so when you empty your dehumidifier, it's full of dioxin water.
Or
Any
you have just
any
wet walls.
groundwater
I mean,
in the
walls
basement,
theoretically.
if the groundwater is
A lot of them.
contaminated, it's in the basement.
A lot of wet walls.
But
You know,
most
you just have
basements
wet. It's
aren't
just
full
wet.
of groundwater. They're full of rainwater. So I just want to put it in
That's
perspective.
true.
Right, right.
There are some homes at risk for this in Ann Arbor, but 95% of people with wet basements have wet basements because
It's just
rain
use.
is coming in and seeping down the
I
side of
don't
the
think you can
house.
say that definitively.
Okay,
There's a lot
I
of
can't say the
other-
percent
Yes.
definitively, you're absolutely right, but I think most of the wet basements are not groundwater touching the
We
basement.
have Water Hill.
Let's see, in
we have
our
Fountain
our
Springs.
all right.
street, they dug a foundation and it filled. One of my friends
We
over on the other
already- we already
side, they
know
dug a
that.
foundation and it
Are you
filled.
over by that?
You know,
Groundwater
what?
depth
You
too,
were
and there's
over
certain
there.
areas where
Oh,
they're
that's
at risk.
I'm just saying, all the people with wet basements.
Yeah, Abbottfield, that's another one.
Yeah.
One on Glendale.
So I'm not
Field.
saying it's not a problem, I
Right.
just think we need to caution people
Right,
that
yeah.
just because you have a wet basement
Doesn't mean you have
in the
Dioxane.
plume,
Right.
doesn't mean you're at risk. You know, I was helping some lady was just east of Maple, trying to show her that the plume is 45 feet below your house. So any moisture there
Right.
is unlikely to be dioxane groundwater that's gone up 45 feet. You know, but as we get into West Park, and there are houses that are literally built on the creek, you know,
Yes.
that you can hear water running underneath, you know, so those are the ones we need to find and pay attention
Some
to.
of them
And
you
to
can
the point
see
of-
water if you look in their
I
drip.
think we may find, my gut feel is that we may find that worrying about dioxane intrusion is like worrying about radon. The way you find out whether or not there's radon in the basement is you go measure. You don't do a soil study and say this house is built on such and such a percentage of stone rather than sand.
I mean, that's one way to do it for sure, but
Well, we're drilling
I don't
wells.
think people want to wait until it gets into their basement to find out
Right.
they're at risk. So we got areas like this that are subject to, this is where groundwater gets closer to the surface as the
That we
surface
know
falls
about.
away. So these are
Exactly.
areas that have been studied and
But I
The-
know
Where-
up on
Where's
Spring
that map
Street,
from?
there's
I'm
seeps
sorry,
up
what's
on-
the source of that map?
this, the
The, with the green.
2006 and 2007 maps done by the company
Okay, okay.
of where the depth to groundwater is within
Okay.
10 feet
Oh,
On the surface.
of the
okay.
surface.
I don't think I've seen that before. I don't remember.
I grew up on God Street.
Yeah, I did see that.
I know that
Yeah,
neighborhood.
there's
I
question
played in
marks
West
here.
Park.
Yep.
I knew
And-
where the water used to be.
And what you'll find is that this is probably not definitive. This is just based on the information that they were able to gather. There's probably other places
There's a lot of seeps, like on, there's a.
where you get little pockets here and there, so it might affect one or two houses. But, you know, to find that information requires a lot more investigation. But as long as people are aware that that could be
Exposure.
exposure,
We need to start
and we
looking.
need some permanent wells to continue to look at this, because right here, NW82S, and when this map was done, the largest, it was like 330 parts per billion, just up gradient. And this is the only the last shallow well before it hits this area. There's no more shallow wells. They're permanent shallow wells. And it's already 330 parts per billion here. So the sampling that the DEQ did of temporary wells probably should have been permanent, so we have ongoing monitoring of that to have more heads up of how soon that's going to make it there. Now, it may be that if it comes in at 1900 parts per billion, maybe that's a moot point, but when it was 19 parts per billion, that was definitely, or 29, 29, sorry. That was definitely more of an issue, but we don't have a whole lot of time because there's other concentrations coming down the pike here.
Well, Betts is at 1,000 or over 1,000. That's
Oh,
Park.
Yeah, the company was supposed to clean everything up to 85 back at Wagner, and everything here can be at 2,800. So as long as they have that groundwater surface water standard of 2,800, the 1,900 here could be a risk for people.
It may not be that far off.
Well, it takes time for it to make, my point is that they need to have more monitoring
Yep.
to know what's going on here. On a continuous basis, basically, not just here and there whenever it comes up in the news. We need to keep track of this stuff for the duration.
So there's a guy who lives high up on Spring Street who's started a neighborhood group, and he's come to the watershed group meetings, and he says there's a lot of seeps and groundwater flowing up on Spring Street. Now, you know, he says these streets have names like Spring Street and Fountain Street and
For a
Math
reason.
Street for a reason. And
It's
it's
Water
called
Hill, for
Water
Christ's
Hill.
sake.
And it's a glacial till, and you have all of these stratifications, and the groundwater can work its way, you know, through these stratifications and come out at the surface. And that's the issue that a lot of people are complaining about. And I'm wanting to know, are we going to be exposing homeowners through groundwater, near surface groundwater exposure? I'm glad we're starting to look at that, and I think it's an important issue, and I think we can't wait until you're at, you know, 1,000 part per billion in your basement. You know, you're in a confined space in a basement, the stuff will evaporate, and it won't have an easy way to escape the basement, and it could get concentrated in the basement. And I think that that's a concern that I have, and I think most of the toxicology on this compound is based on inhalation.
And this used to be not so, people got into a false sense of security when the court ordered a 5-year cleanup. Well, okay, everything's going to be fixed in 5 years. Well, there's no way they're going to clean up in 5 years. Yet the EQ and the company let the judge believe that that was something that was doable. Meanwhile, the plume spread, and now we're talking about many decades, maybe centuries before this is fully cleaned up. And we've got to have the monitoring and the controls in place for the duration so that we don't have any more screw-ups and more water supplies contaminated by this.
What's the red perimeter on there that abuts the river?
That's
Here?
the prohibition zone.
The
That's
prohibition
the
zone, and
new
then the
expanded-
pink is the expanded prohibition zone.
Okay, that's the original, the red one's the original.
The red one's
Okay.
the original, and then pink is the expanded.
Unfortunately, the prohibition zone had to be expanded to the north
Right.
within
I remember
a year and a
that.
half,
Yeah.
Didn't have to be.
and it's moving north towards Barton. Now, Larry Lemke, the geologist who studied this for the last 20 years, has said, you know, once it gets past, his opinion, once it gets past M14, it's a downhill run into Barton Pond.
Oh, yeah.
And the DEQ at a town hall meeting said there's a blocking agent at Barton Pond. It won't get into Barton Pond. A week later at a CARB meeting, I asked him point blank about that. He said, no, actually, I would say there's a preferred path into Barton Pond down an old creek bed. So
Well, Honey
there is
Creek
no
is a-
blocking, agent,
Yeah.
except right at the dam, potentially. He said the rest of the Barton Pond is an easy target. And he's, you know, very concerned about that, as well as, you know, exposures in the city and in Scio Township. And even the city has stated in their pleading to the court that Barton Pond is a concern of theirs, as well as vapor intrusion.
So here's one of the potentiometric surface maps.
If you drive out Urinary Drive, and you get to Bird Hills Road, there's a little parking area there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a pond tucked away in the weeds back there
Yeah.
that is always wet.
Well, there's a lot of perched water.
Hmm?
That's one of the perched
That's
water.
not surface water.
Yeah, perched water is where
It's trapped with clay underneath it.
yeah, it's for runoff, and there's no place for the water to go, so it sets there. There's a lot of things like that around the township and the city, but that's not likely to have dioxane in any more than First Sister Lake or Second Sister Lake. Those are shallow. We're talking about the lake of dioxane that's 50 to 300 feet deep. That's when we have to worry about. It's where the dioxide really is.
We're after 8, yeah.
Yep, we gotta-
We need
Can
to
I-
go
Already
have a
over.
sitter and have to relieve.
So, can I make a a couple quick announcements.
Sure.
So one is that the same group, Rebecca Harden, she has a proposal for a teach-out, a University of Michigan teach-out. It's a very thin proposal. It doesn't have any details in it, so I can't really tell you much about it, except that Matt's name's on there, my name's on there, and Alan Burton's name is on there. But I'll let you know as I know more.
And the teach out is for?
It's on dioxane.
And I gave her a bunch of other names
Yeah.
that ought to be part of
What's the
that.
time frame for that?
It's not there. I don't know.
I think they're going to hear soon on whether they get a little bit of funding to do
Yeah,
it.
There's no money, there's no budget in what I got, there's
Mm-mm.
nothing. It's so thin, it's like 2 pages or something.
This will be
But I just
on-
wanted to kind of put that out there so people are aware
This
of
will be
it.
on campus?
It's going to be a University of Michigan sponsored event and funded event.
How long
I
is
think
the
it's coming
event
out of
gonna be?
Seas, out of the new School for Environment and
Is this
Sustainability.
like a weekend?
I couldn't tell you.
I don't think we know. There's
Yeah.
a sense that they want to do some teach-outs.
I have a feeling it's a concept paper more than a proposal.
Yeah.
All right.
You know, that's how it
But
reads
it's not
to
going to
me.
be like a semester
Oh,
project, right?
no.
Okay.
So
That's
th-
good, because I got upset when I read the University of Arizona is doing a teach-in on dioxin.
Yeah, well, that's
Wait
because
a
they're
minute.
too soon, they're expending.
We did the first teach-in ever.
I know,
Here.
but they're
We
doing-
should be doing the teach-in.
But they're expending huge amounts of money to clean up the water in Arizona. And we're just pretending that it doesn't exist.
Right, right.
So the second announcement I'd like to make is, if you're not aware of it yet, or if you have overlooked the emails, is that Michael Dowerson, or
Yep.
Dorson, which I knew him when he was in his 20s, and he was Dowerson then, and now he's Dorson, I've been informed. That he has been nominated to head up the EPA Toxics Division.
Right.
It's very controversial. It's been written up in all the major papers, the Post, the Times, et cetera, et cetera. But he came and has been a proponent for, dioxane, what for dioxane, it's not really so toxic. And that's been actually cited in some of these articles in the New York Times as an example of how he's been bought by industry. So I think that you might want to kind of Google that and look at that. And the
Is there a
third
way
thing-
to comment?
I'm sorry?
Are they taking comment on the nomination? Is there
Yes.
something we can do?
I think they are,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, he presented to
There
the
were also
DEQ
comment-
back in 2013.
Yes, he was, and we tried to get into the meeting and they wouldn't let us
Yep.
in.
The DEQ, to their credit, did not
But they-
believe his presentation or his
Well, they
position.
did, yeah, they didn't go along with his
Talked about a
recommendation.
threshold carcinogen, the EPA doesn't even have a definition for it, but he was trying to state that this is a threshold carcinogen.
Yeah,
That you
him.
have to get certain
Did you ever
exposure
meet him?
levels before
No,
it's
but I know
dangerous.
about the threshold.
This happened back in the 90s too, the same
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Well,
Different guy.
okay,
And
and that's
one
my
more
third,
thing.
okay, go ahead.
No, you had one more thing.
Oh, I have one more thing, which actually the 90s reminds me of, which is that I finally checked out of the library a book that I was advised to read about a year or two ago. And if you haven't read it, I can't recommend it enough. It's called Tom's River. And I can see, and this was, nobody in my department or in my school has ever read
This
this.
is Ann Arbor, and
But
Scio
this is an
Township
astounding story. He won the Pulitzer Prize for this book
predicting the
in
future.
2014, and it's about the extensive contamination of a town in New Jersey by Seeps, and it is a stunner. It is so well documented, and it will rattle you. I will guarantee you, it will rattle you. There was collusion on all parts to keep information from the residents that they were drinking very heavily polluted water, and it just goes on from there. It's so well done. You have to read the footnotes. I don't tend to read footnotes because I read electronic books. And about footnote 29, I decided I better start reading the footnotes, and you have to read the footnotes, because
Who's it by?
But Tom's River.
Tom's
Yeah.
River. There's only one Tom's River.
Yeah.
It's the only book.
But it's not
Tom's
spelled-
River,
And it won
New
the
Jersey,
Pulitzer.
New
right?
Jersey, right?
And it
As I
won the
recall, it's
Pulitzer in
not spelled
2014,
T-O-M,
I think.
though, is it like
So anyway,
T-O-M?
I think
Just
that
T-O-M.
for card, it will be instructional.
Oh, God, yeah.
You will just, Benny started reading, we were on vacation, I start reading this.
book.
I start reading out excerpts,
Let's We can discuss this at another.
Rattle you.
But it will be instructional. If you're involved in this site, it will open your eyes.
It's so similar, it's spooky.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? So like when I sign in on this thing, are there emails that go out regularly from this group?
Our meeting announcements, so I can send you a link to sign up for that.
Yeah, could you
Yes.
please? Because
Yes.
I just don't know if I
Yes,
missed
I
anything.
think
I
I'll-
follow,
yeah, maybe I'll get rid of
I
some.
follow on Twitter,
Take
so
one.
I see a lot of stuff on Twitter. But I'm not, I try and keep up with it, but I just wasn't, I don't want to miss anything.
On the
Yeah.
card,
A lot of people ask me about it, like, I know a lot of people, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to always
Great.
inform
That was a good
people.
idea.
Yes.
on the
Yeah.
card website, there's a place.
Thank you, Rita.
The larger DEQ
I know,
list.
I know Kristen needs to go. Are there other
yeah.
announcements? I just,
Yeah, let's move on.
Right.
yeah.
Did you have an announcement? Okay, never mind.
All right.
Thank
I
you.
So
move
thank
that we
you,
adjourn.
everybody.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, aye.
Absolutely, I'm so sorry you have to take two. You
We're
guys.
gonna maybe
I'm
be the
sorry, would you mind
14th.
signing this?
Yeah, I'm gonna check in with Mitch tomorrow, and hopefully we can get that now so that people can, plan.